All right. We are live. Okay, welcome everybody to another live training in the Fix and Flip Foundation group. And so we're streaming over on Facebook. Just made sure that that is live and active. So if you're seeing that there right now, and it's 1 p.m. on Wednesday, jump into the Zoom. The link is there. Come join us here in the Zoom. And if you're catching this later, no worries about that. But if you are here and you are here live now, take advantage. Come join us, help kind of direct the dialogue and engage and be able to ask questions in real time and get them answered while we do this as I go through this slide deck and as I share. And then I'll open up to a Q&A. And my intention today is to take you through a very high level understanding of zoning, specifically around floor area ratio, maximum lot coverage, and then determining your building envelope, right? Those are like three key elements, and we'll go a little deep, but not deep enough that any of us will leave here as experts, right? We're not looking to be that expert in our businesses. Being an engineer or an architect, unless that is what you do for a living, is not what we're doing here as investors. Ideally, we know enough to be dangerous, right? You've heard that before. We know enough to be dangerous. We know enough to model deals, determine highest and best, write offers confidently, and at the same time be working hand in hand with the professionals, with the engineers and the architects who this is what they do, right? And ultimately put together a really solid submission, something we could put in front of the town and get approvals for. And that's what I want you to leave today with, right? Like just a better understanding on how all that works, be able to talk the talk. Let's jump in. We're 2 past the hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. And we have some, relatively dense material. I want to make sure we can get through it and leave time for questions. I'll do a screen share, and just let me know in the comments if and when you can see the screen. I'm going to present from a deck I created in Canva, and I'll have the chat open off to the side, so everybody should be able to comment as we go. Some of you have already submitted questions in the Facebook, so I've got questions that I can answer as we go. But ideally, we'll get some feedback from you. Keep this engaging. Like, excuse me. If you've been on these calls before, my intention is to always, and if whenever possible, be engaging as we go. Right? Like, I don't want this to be one-sided talking head type content. I want to be able to build rapport with you guys, answer the specific questions that you have. And especially as I'm talking about something, if it triggers something and you're like, oh, can we go deeper there? I'd like to get a better understanding of that. Throw that in the chat, right? Let me know that. And if we can, we will, right? If it's going deeper for 2 or 3 more minutes to provide additional clarity, I'm happy to do that. If it's 30 minutes, if I already know going down that path is going to take us 30 minutes off track, then that's good for us to also know, because then we can prepare a different talk, right? That could be a topic for a future training. So again, just encouraging you guys to engage. If you're here live, take advantage and do engage. And so I already alluded to this. Here's what we're going to spend our time together on. We're going to talk about the max lot coverage, determining what you can put on these lots, right? Whether you're going in for just like a land development play, or if it's an infill play, right? Like if you've got to tear something down to make room for something new, or if you're adding square footage, right? Even if you're adding square footage, increasing the coverage, all of these things are going to come into play. And so I want to give you, like I said, a high level understanding of what all this is, and just better position you guys to write offers confidently. So here's a typical definition of what zoning is: your municipal or local laws, regulations that govern how real property can and cannot be used in certain geographic areas. Like how it can and cannot be used, those are the key words there. And that's what we're going to spend time today diving into, to help you get a little bit more clarity. Oh, like that's a hard no. I already know that deal doesn't qualify because of the zoning, right? Like think about how many times you've gone down, for those of you that have written offers, only to later be blindsided when you go for a survey to find out that what you thought you could do there, you can't do, right? Like if we go for the no early, if we understand the zoning and we can model these deals, we'll understand like, hey, that's not going to work because I can't do what I hope to do there. In turn, this deal is a no-go. It's a non-starter. And think about how many times over the course of years, right, those types of opportunities will suck you of time and energy. If you go for the no, if you have a good understanding of zoning, you know what you cannot do, great. You could just pass on those opportunities because they're not opportunities, right? They're distractions disguised as opportunities. So we want to avoid those. So how then do you figure out what zone your subject property is in, right? There's a couple of different ways. This is pretty straightforward. You can go and pull the zoning map or the tax records. A lot of these live on the town websites or they live on eCode 360, right? Like a lot of towns now, most towns now, I would imagine, if you're watching this video in your market, those municipalities are submitting and housing all of their ordinances, their zoning maps, their schedules, everything online. So you should be able to find it. I put off to the side what a typical zoning map looks like. This is actually one for a higher end town. So you'll see the zones broken down by color. That won't always be the case, but there will definitely be lines delineating individual zones, even if it doesn't look this good, right? But this one is here just as an example. So like I said, zoning maps, you could pull the tax records. You should be able to find out what the zoning for that particular subject property is there. If a survey exists, an old survey, right, you won't be able to build to that old survey, but at least it'll give you some additional confidence that you can or can't do whatever it is that you hope to do there. And those three are in green because if those say that the zone is what it is, R1, R2, whatever, you know, whatever the code is in that particular municipality, you can trust that those are going to be right. What you can't trust, but can provide you some clarity sometimes are the MLS or the RPR reports. If you go in and you're bidding for an on-market property and the zoning is there, it often isn't, but if it is there, just understand that the person who put it there is not an expert. And so don't rely on that. So you can get a little bit of insight that way, but I wouldn't bank on that, right? Same thing when it goes to the agent or the seller, asking them, they may know, but I wouldn't bank on that. I would say, okay, like that's going to provide me with a little additional clarity, but I'm going to move forward. I'm going to go confirm what I was told by looking at the tax records. So a lot of times people will just stick to number 4 and number 5, get the answer from the agent, and then not validate or verify that, and then come to find out later that they can't do what they thought they could do because the agent misrepresented, whether intentionally or unintentionally, misrepresented the zoning. So again, defer to the experts, try and find the stuff online. It's available online in most any municipality at this point. And again, the survey is going to like tell the tale once you do eventually get it, but that's how you can determine what zone the subject property is in. And as I'm going through this, let me know if this is making sense, right? Like if you can understand that you don't want to be reliant on an agent because that person's not the expert, then like clearly who is? Well, an architect or an engineer or the tax assessor, right? These are the people that you're going to want to rely on. But again, there's different sources for this information. And now where to find the actual code once you've determined what zone this particular property is in. Say it's, and here, if you look to the right, this is what a really dense requirements, bulk standards looks like, right? And they don't all look like this. I want to show you one, and I'll show you another that's a little bit easier to read because we're limited on time. We're not going to have the time required to break down a dense one like the one that's shown here, but I want you to see what they typically look like and how robust they can be, just for reference. But again, where do you find the code, right? And what's it called? A lot of times the challenge is, what do these municipalities call these charts, for a lack of a better word, right? What you're looking at is a chart, or a graph, I should say, right? It's a table. It's just a bunch of data in a table form. Well, off to the left, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all different names for the same thing. This is where people tend to get overwhelmed. Is it called bulk standards? Is it called area requirements, building requirements? Is it a zoning schedule? Is it a land use schedule, right? All those essentially mean the same thing. If you find the schedule or the requirements. Those are the two words that are typically pretty consistently used to identify these tables. And so if you find that on the municipality's website and it has this look to it, right, just confirm that it's relevant and that it's current. And that's what it is. Like, that's what you're looking at. You're essentially looking at the code that you can build to. And now you've identified the zone. You know that the subject property sits in an R10 zone. And now you've got the zoning in front of you, the code in table form. And now you could start to figure out, okay, what's highest and best and what can I actually put here based on what the code is. And remember, everything we're talking about is to circumvent a variance. We're not, like, none of what we're talking about today is variance related. That's a different world. That's not the business that we're in. And frankly, that's not the business I encourage you to be in either, right? A variance is a flyer, right? You're taking a bet. It's a gamble. There's no guarantee you'll get what you go before the board to get approval for. And so that's not the business we're in. You can't build a scalable business on a gamble. So why would I want you to come away from this with is an understanding of what by rights zoning is for that subject property, whatever that is in whatever market you're in. And so let's see how we can then interpret these requirements. What is it? How would we read what we just saw? And so I've pulled, again, a simpler one, right? We just don't have the time today to go super deep on one of those more robust ones. This one, right? Like, this is clearly all the zoning for a much larger municipality with a bunch of different zones. And so we're looking at a real straightforward municipality with very few zones and a very clear and concise building standard, right? Like, that's what we need for the purposes of this call. And so let's quickly just jump in and we'll talk about two specific sections. We'll talk about the setbacks, right? And then the coverages. So think about it now. You figured out the zone. You know what zone this particular parcel or subject property sits in because you've gone to the map and you've gone to the tax records and you've confirmed that it's R5, R10, R3, whatever, right? Those are just like differentiators that the town gives it. And now you've gone that one step further and you've pulled the code, the bulk standards, the building requirements, the area standards, right? It's got a lot of different names. You've pulled this, whether online or from the municipality directly, right? You can go in person and access all of these things as well, but you don't have to anymore. And now you've got like the section that applies to your particular deal, right? So now you're looking specifically to understand, okay, like, here's this lot. Here's this house I'm going to tear down. Here's this house I want to add to. What can I do here? How do I interpret this? How do I read this? Well, like I said, there's two parts you want to be conscious of. It's the setbacks, which gives you your building envelope. Like, you have to create a building envelope within the setbacks. And I'll show you on the next slide what that looks like visually. And then how much of the lot itself can you cover with buildings and sheds and driveways and patios and a lot of those other things that are often, forgotten. So in this particular case, we're going to look at understanding the setbacks first. So the top box pulled off to the right are the setbacks. The bottom box are the coverages. Setbacks and coverages. Those are the two things we're going to focus on. And so, and I'm assuming depending what you're watching this on, this may be really tough to read. So I'll try and keep it high level and not like get too granular with the survey on the left, because I know that for most folks, unless you're on a big desktop right now, this is going to look super small. And so let's jump in. So the dotted line surrounding the building is your setback line. And so in those squares here, right, and if you're watching on a decent sized screen, you ought to be able to see me moving around the cursor. These are identifying the same setbacks that are listed off to the right on this table. So you'll see 5-foot side yard setbacks. You'll see 25-foot rear yard setback, 25-foot front yard setback. All this conforms to the code. And so that was done by the architect to ensure that the addition to the building stays within the approved setbacks, right? We're not talking about coverages yet. We're focusing just on the setbacks. So we've got a lot. In this particular case, the lot's got a bit of like a pizza pie shape to it, right? It flares out towards the back, but we know that on the left and the right, we need to be 5 feet in from the property line. And we know at the front and the back, we also need to be 25 and 35 feet, right? So these are these setbacks that we have to adhere to. And we know that that dotted line dictates the area which we could build within per the setbacks. And so what you'll see here off to the right on the bottom is a bubble, like a blown up section of where we had a setback encroachment. And so I want to show you this as an example of how you can work around this, right? So you'll see the dotted line crossing where the existing garage is. And why this is an issue, the existing garage is grandfathered in. This shouldn't be of any concern unless you want to add square footage, which in this case we did, right? We want to go up over the garage. Well, what the setbacks tell us, what the zoning, what the code tells us is that we can go up over the garage, but we've got to recess the second floor in this distance right here. And so if you're watching, you ought to be able to see my cursor, and there's a small sliver of the second floor that needed to be pulled in from the property line, more so than the first floor because of the setbacks. So this isn't necessarily a deal killer. Obviously, this wasn't the deal killer. This is a great deal, and this deal's getting done despite having to make a setback adjustment. So I share this with you to help you understand, okay, what is a setback? What is it doing? Like limiting where I can build, but then is there a workaround? Well, there is, right? You can just recess the second floor in that little bit so that way you don't encroach on the setback. And so I know I'm using a lot of formal language that may be new to a lot of folks, but it's important that you understand and can talk the talk. And over time, you'll get comfortable with this language and be able to better articulate your argument when you go before the board, if you ever have to go before the board, or if you sit with an architect to do a drawing, right? Like that's part of the reason we do this, right? That's and we're here to learn and grow through these processes, right? So if you're seeing this and it's a little overwhelming for the first time, that's par for the course. That's to be expected. And with the more reps you log, the comfort level with this will go up, right? You'll just get that much better at this. So encouraging you to lean in, right? Like, and come away from this with notes. If you saw the post yesterday, encouraging you to be here today, we said, come ready to take notes, ask a lot of questions, because there are going to be a lot of questions, right? And there should be. So again, think about the setbacks, think about how that's going to apply to the subject property you're looking at, or this, this particular parcel you want to build on, and then start thinking, oh, like, am I going to have to make any adjustments, right, per these setbacks? Are these setbacks really aggressive? In this town, they're not very aggressive. 5 feet to the left and right is nothing, right? You might be accustomed to more like 12 feet, 15 feet, depending on what market you're in. And so now we're going to transition to coverage. So we've talked a little bit about setbacks. Now let's talk about coverages. And again, we're not going to go super deep. These are nuanced elements that we're not expected to be experts in, right? We want to have a good handle on this. We want to have a fundamental understanding of these things, but then we want to bring the professionals in to help us get this thing like over the line, right? So giving you an image, same image again, instead of pulling, so we pulled the setbacks out. They're still here, but what I'm highlighting here are coverages now. So let's focus on the two coverages of concern for us. Max lot coverage. Here you see it called impervious lot coverage, right? We called it max lot coverage. A lot of these things have a lot of different names, which lends to a lot of the confusion and why a lot of folks get overwhelmed and don't want to like do this, right? Like, and I almost wonder if some of that is the town's doing, like to discourage us from doing a lot of these deals. But so max lot coverage in this particular town, it's 75% of the total lot, which the math's already done for you here. We pulled this off the zoning schedule on this blueprint, right? So I'm working from something that we've already done just to make it that much easier. And so 75% of the total lot that you're looking at here is a little over 5,000 square feet of coverage. So this town is very generous. It's unlikely you'll find a lot of towns where they'll allow you to build on 75% of the lot unless it's you'd be expected to build on most of the lot, right? Because there's a lot of those row houses and such. But if you're going into the suburbs and places like that, I wouldn't expect to be able to build on that much of the lot. So anyway, 75% of the total lot is 5,000-ish square feet. Well, if you look here, you'll see that the existing and then the proposed. So the existing total lot coverage was 1,715 square feet, way below the max lot coverage, way below the ordinance, the zoning, the standard. And I've highlighted a couple of things where there's existing and a couple of things where it's going to go up, because if you look, you'll see it's 1,715. It's going to be increased to 2,625. So where's it going to go up? Well, it's going to go up clearly with this addition here, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's going to go up because there's going to be a patio here. It's going to go up because this driveway is going to be widened to 2 cars wide, increasing coverage along this line. If you're following on the screen, you'll see along this line. So just think lot coverage, impervious lot coverage, anything that water can't penetrate. So houses count, sheds count, patios count, driveways count, walkways count. So those are those things that are kind of listed here. If you look, and again, we have up to 5,000 and we're going to only use 2,600. And so there's no reason to cover any more of the lot. And so you see there's a lot of front yard, there's a nice side yard, and there's a good rear yard here that's not covered. So that's lot coverage. Now let's just quickly look at building coverage. And so again, in this municipality, you could cover 50% of the lot with house. Again, that's very generous. You wouldn't often see that in a lot of places. This town is kind of a blend, right? It's a transitional town. It's not an inner city, but it's like transitioning into a suburb. And so they are willing and they have allowances for more building on these lots. So 3,400 feet by rights, you've heard me say that, right? Per the code, by rights, you could do 3,400 feet. What we ultimately decided to do from a building coverage standpoint is 1,750. And so if you look at the dotted line, that's the main building coverage. That's where that 1,750 is coming from. And that should provide a little bit of clarity. Hopefully on your screens, you can see this, and the red arrows driving to where the lot coverage increases are, the dotted line showing you the building coverage. And we're going to unpack this a little bit further, but let me just pause there. I have a couple of questions and I give you guys opportunity to take a quick look at this and ask any specific questions you have about lot coverage and building coverage before we move forward. Ed, question here. If you have a property on a big lot, but comp in the area isn't high for at a level, would it be hard to sell a house in a retirement community? Houses aren't worth that much, but are well kept. I feel like that's 2 questions. And so where we're headed with this talk and the next couple of slides are actually going to be the answer to part 1 of that question. What I'll say about that before we move forward is that just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So just be mindful of that when you're doing the math on these deals. Like if you look here, we could cover 50% of the lot with house, right? 50% of the lot is 3,400 square feet of house. Like we don't need to. This town wouldn't reward us for building that much house. So just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Just because you can cover 75% of the lot doesn't mean you should put a parking lot in the backyard, right? You shouldn't just pave over the whole lot. So I think that's partially an answer to your first question. And we'll go a little bit deeper on that as we go further. And then whether or not it's hard to sell a house in a retirement community, I don't have any experience doing that, but my gut tells me it's going to be hard to sell a house anywhere that there's rules and HOAs. That's always been the case. So, I mean, it's harder. I wouldn't say it's hard. Alice, what town is the lot in, and is 2,600 foot average build? So this is in Union County in New Jersey, in a town called Kenilworth. The lots there are typically 50 by 100. This happens to be 60 by 100. So this is a slightly oversized lot for this town. They have really favorable zoning, as you can see, which affords you the ability to build more house. Would you build 2,600 feet here? Well, in this case, this house, it warrants it because of what's happening. Like and this is why, kind of piggybacking off the last question, like just because you could doesn't mean you should, right? Just because you can build, in this case, 3,000 plus feet doesn't mean you should. What should you build? Well, what will sell? And after doing some research, the determination was made that even though you could build over 3,000 feet, people don't necessarily want 3,000 feet in this town, and they're not going to pay you for it. So why overbuild? Build down to what the town wants, to what the buyer wants, and then you're safe. And so in this town, that's 2,600 feet, 2,800 feet. But yeah, every house, each time we do this in a new market, we're doing this exact exercise that I'm taking you guys through, determining what highest and best is. How many square feet should we build? Igor, when it comes to lot coverage and drainage, how do you know if the town requires a costly dry well system to control rainwater? Awesome question, and very nuanced, but like a really, really good question. Part of what we also encourage you to do, like we said, we're not expecting you guys to become experts in every municipality and every form of zoning, right? That's not the business that we're in. What we do want to do is become like dangerous in three. Like I want to get hyper focused on three markets, and I want to understand the zoning the way we're talking about it right here in those three markets. And if I have that level of clarity, I have a leg up, right? Like I'm going to be in a position of strength going in, making offers versus anybody else that might be doing the same in that market, because I'm going to know at a very nuanced degree what I can do in that town, including what you're suggesting, which is, hey, if I add 600 feet or more in this town, that triggers the stormwater management ordinance, and now I have to put in a dry well. If I build 1,000 feet or more in this town, I know that that triggers this stormwater management ordinance, and I have to put in a dry well, right? So you're going to need to know that, and that'll be, each market will be different. In this particular market, in this municipality, that's not a concern. They don't have any stormwater or drainage issues or ordinances, so you don't have to worry about that. But there are markets where those little nuanced things do apply. And so that's a great question. Knowing that going in is critical, because that could be a line item that you either do or don't have to account for on your scope, right? So great question, man. Very good question. And one that we talk a lot about, like on our accelerator calls on Tuesday nights, we go deep. We do what we're doing here, but we go that much deeper because we're talking about like real deals that folks are modeling and writing offers on. And we do that. We do go and say, oh, wait, what about stormwater management? You're going to add 1,000 square feet to the back of this house. That's going to trigger that. You're going to need to do a dry well. Okay, you're going to need to bake in an extra $12,000 to do 2 8x6 concrete seepage pits, right? So, but I don't want to go too off course there, but great question. And so now let me give you guys a little bit of additional clarity on FAR. This is where like we could go really deep and we could go and burrow down the rabbit hole. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to overwhelm anybody with this. What I want you to understand is that between building coverage and max lot coverage, those two numbers, right? How much building can I create and how much of the lot around it can I cover? There's something called FAR, floor area ratio. In a lot of municipalities, this won't apply. And whatever your building coverage is, you can just go right up over the top, right? So if your building coverage is 20%, you could actually get 40% in the form of square footage. So if that math follows, right? So just think about, I did very simple and straightforward math to make this easy, to not complicate this. You have a 50-foot wide by 100-foot deep lot, essentially a 5,000 square foot lot. Well, the numbers in order, like you can cover more lot, you can have slightly less floor area, and you can have that much less building coverage. So think 40% of the lot could be covered for the ease of math. That's 2,000 feet of the 5,000 feet. The rest has to be grass. Think of it that way. How much of it can be building? Well, 20%. So only 1,000 of the 5,000 feet can be the primary, the residence, the house. Floor area ratio is that wrench that they'll sometimes throw in that's going to prevent you from just doubling the building. So they don't necessarily want you to build a McMansion just because you can. They don't want oversized houses on undersized lots, essentially. So the building coverage is 20% of 5,000. That's 1,000 feet. And so you might just think to yourself, well, I could just double that, right? I could just put a second floor on, then I have 2,000 feet. Oh, and I can go up 2.5 stories. That means I could have 2.5 times that. So I could have 2,500 square feet of living, right? Per the code. Well, the floor area ratio, like I said, is that wrench that they'll often throw in that brings you back down to reality. And so you can't just double the building coverage. You can't 2.5x the building coverage because you're going up. And so again, I don't want to go too deep there. What I want you to understand is that in towns where they have a floor area ratio, where they have an FAR, just know that it's usually going to be working against you. The FAR is never in your favor. It's usually going to be somewhere between the building coverage and the lot coverage, and it's going to bring you down, right? It's going to just limit how much square footage of house you can create. And I hope that's helpful, but it's just something to be mindful of. It often is in the code. It's in the ordinance. You'll see it. It's often got like the asterisk next to it, just like it does here. And it's meant to draw your attention there. When it's not there, you'll see a dash through it and you don't have to worry about it. When it is there, you're going to need to factor it into your decision and your calculations. Check a quick question. What's included in the difference between building coverage and lot coverage? Driveways, sheds. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Driveways, sheds, a patio, a walkway, a concrete pad that you might pour to put your HVAC units on. Anything that's not permeable, any surface that water can't find its way through is going to count against lot coverage. So hopefully that helps provide some clarity and differentiates between building coverage, lot coverage, and then, like I said, in the middle there is that floor area ratio when it applies, right? So again, this is the exception, not the rule. So not trying to spend too much time here. And then let me see where we're at on time. We're really up against it. I wanted to add these two kind of just like bonuses in. I'll go through them very quickly because I want to be able to back out and leave a little bit of time for Q&A. But just with regard to building permits, like once you've figured the zoning out, what do you need to get ready for submissions and approvals? And then here's not an exhaustive list of documents, but here are the things that you want to be thinking about. And if of course, this presentation is made available to you guys, and it's going to live in the group indefinitely, but this is one that you might want to take a screenshot of and then be able to reference back to this later. And then the submissions process. Again, I was hoping we'd have a little bit more time, but we're not gonna be able to get through this. What I want you to just be conscious of is the touch point cadence and the speed. Like what's important with this is like, once you've got the zoning figured out and you're working with the professionals, like it says here, number 3, right? Like get the submissions contact, engage the professionals, start talking to trades, get the package ready for submission. That's either you, your project manager, your GC, right? Who's ever going to drive this effort in the field, who's ever in charge of operations. Like the name of the game is speed to lead, and just be touching everybody, right? Like do not leave your architect unattended for weeks on end, right? Like you got to be in their inbox every 3rd day, making sure that they know that you're waiting on them. And so just to bring everything full circle, the zoning through the process, like it's important that you understand what zone it's in, that you know where to go find the code, how to read the code, and what your max building coverage is, so you can draft an offer, because you can calculate what the highest and best is. How much house can I put here? Once I know that, I can draft an offer confidently. The next step is kind of handing your proposed plans, like what you're envisioning creating there, over to the professionals, having the engineer do the survey, having the architect start drafting up concepts of what he thinks you can build there based on what you've already told him and what he knows to be true about the zoning, and then submitting an approval, what we just talked about, putting these packages in front of the town, getting them to green light your plan. And then quickly Q&A, I just wanted to encourage you guys to be proactive. What can you do to get a better handle on the zoning in the particular markets that you're farming, right? Like I said, we're not expected to become experts here. None of us are engineers unless that's what you do by trade. We're investors. And as investors, we just want to get enough of a handle on the zoning in a particular market so that way we can be dangerous and we can write really good, solid offers with confidence. And we can do our highest and best math modeling these deals. Let me jump out of here. And I will, I've got a couple more questions, but let's see how many we can get through in a couple minutes. Any other questions, drop them in the chat while we're going through these, and I'll try and just get through them, as quickly and, thoroughly as I can. Are there height restrictions? I know that I only briefly alluded to the height restrictions in a lot of, it's going to be different in every market, right? So just get a handle on, excuse me, get some clarity on what that is in your market. A lot of times what you'll see is it's 2.5 stories, right? So the example we gave where the building coverage is 1,000 feet, you would instinctively think if it's 2.5 stories, I could go 1,000, 1,500. Well, that's not necessarily true because of the FAR. We talked about that. But yeah, building and height restrictions is definitely going to come into play. So again, that's going to be in the zoning ordinance. It's going to be in that bulk standards, in the area requirements, whatever they call it in your municipality, you'll see it on that table. What is the process to subdivide? That's the one. So that's the arduous process of going before the board and getting the zoning board to approve you splitting one lot into two. And so like we said, we stick to by rights development. We want to always be looking to do what already is approved. We don't necessarily want to go to battle with the town to get something that isn't by rights approved, except in very, very rare circumstances where like it's the stretch, right? Like, this deal is a great deal no matter what, and you happen to have the time to go to battle and you're going for the stretch, you're going for the home run. And if you get it, great. And if you don't, like that triple that you modeled is still in play. But again, that's not a scalable business. That's not the scalable business model that we encourage and teach. So don't necessarily bake that in. That's not what you want to be going into these deals thinking, right? Subdivisions and variances. We did a question about how long does the process take? So assuming that you're going for an as rights development and addition, then the process should take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, right? Each municipality is going to be different, and they've all got about 20 days. That's like their mandate. They've got to get everything reviewed and back to you within 20 days, 21 days. Some municipalities are a little bit different, but just think 2 to 4 weeks. When making offers, would you wait until you have zoning nailed down, or would you make the offer with a contingency upon zoning requirements? So I would make sure that I understood zoning. I would not make an offer contingent on a variance. That I don't know that there's any seller out there that's going to accept that. That's not necessarily true. There are sellers that would take offers contingent on variances, but I think it's best that you get a good enough handle on this, what we're talking about today, that you can confidently write offers. And then as soon as that offer is in and accepted, you're already having conversations with your architect about whether or not you can build what you think you can there. And he's already confirming that for you, right? He's already giving you that additional confidence and clarity that you need to move forward. Like I said, speed to lead. So you won't necessarily have the time, right? In these, like if it's a competitive offer, multiple offer situation, if you're going direct to seller and they're not in a hurry and you're the only person they're talking to, great. But that's not always the case. And more often than not, that's not the case. So you can expect that you're going to need to move fast. And the way to move fast is to have a handle on what we're talking about today in that specific market. In regards to corner lot setbacks, is there a general rule when calculating the rear yard, or are there 2 front yards? Yeah, that's a great question. And very nuanced, but that's exactly right. There are, on a corner, there's actually 2 front yards. So a side yard setback, using the example we went through today, might be 5 feet, 5 feet, but on a corner, it'll be 5 feet on one side and it'll be 25 on the other, because they'll treat the side yard like a front yard because it's got a street. And sometimes it's going to have a driveway on one or the other, right? So you can understand why they would do that, but that's a good question. If you're looking at corner lots, be conscious of that. With zoning being so important and analyzing the type of project we're doing, would it be wise to have a survey done if you can't get information from zoning or research or from the seller? So The short answer is yes. We are big proponents of spending money upfront. We will go and we will bring in an architect, an engineer. We'll pay for a tank sweep. We'll pay to have the sewer scoped. We're more than willing to spend that money upfront because in a way it helps you take control of the deal, but it's also shortening the timeline, right? Like the whole speed to lead concept. If you have a good enough handle on a market and you know the zoning well enough, you can jump right in and you can already say to your architect, hey, I'm going to see the house. I'm going to go like formally accept the offer. I'm going to go get signatures from the seller, whatever the case is. Come with me. Let's take some measurements already. Right. So think about like how you can shorten the timeline by doing those types of things. Get that survey ordered, pay whatever it is in your market, right? Here are going rates about $750. Pay the $750 for the survey. It's the cost of doing business. If you get the survey back, you're that much further ahead. So we're huge advocates for that. So we're a little bit past 140. Let's take just one or two more. From start to finish, your average time is 6 months from offer to putting it on the market. Yeah, I would say that it is in this town and with straightforward deals like these. Yes. Is that always the case? No. There's municipalities where it's going to take that much longer. They're just backed up, right? So they're not going to get you everything back, stamped, sealed, ready to go in 21 days. It's going to take them 4 to 6 weeks. If that's the case, you start baking in those little delays on the front end. The management of the project itself doesn't change much, right? If the house is 2,600 or 3,200 square feet, that's not going to extend your timeline a month. And so, yeah, 6 months is good. 6 months is fair. 8 months is safe, and 12 months is the everything goes wrong number. But that should not be the case. It's very rarely ever the case. If current zoning doesn't match the new code, what would you do? For example, if the existing structure has 5-yard setbacks and the new code requires 7, what are your options? Well, we showed an example that addressed that at a really small scale. If the second floor needs to be recessed in a foot or two to conform so you can avoid getting a variance, a good architect will make that work. They'll make that look intentional. So I wouldn't say that that's a deal killer. If you've got something egregious, right? Like the house itself, the existing house sits outside of the building envelope in a major way. Say the house is shifted all the way to the left of the lot. And so half the house is already like encroaching. Now you're in a situation where it might just be better to tear the whole house down. That we have had that be the case a couple of times. And so that's one consideration. But again, that's the exception more so than it is the rule. And so yeah, guys, we're just up on 145. Thank you for engaging and for asking so many questions. Probably the most questions we've ever gotten on one of these calls. And I expected that would be the case, right? Like we talked about something pretty dense. So grateful for you guys, for your time, for your willingness to be here with us for 45 minutes and to go through, what is often like a really dense and like a cloaked subject, right? Like hopefully this gives you that added confidence, gives you more insight, and gives you the ability to do that highest and best math and write those offers with confidence and get out there. And like I said, don't get carried away. Don't think that you need to be the expert. Don't read the ordinance line by line, 100 and whatever pages worth, right? Just get good clarity in a specific market or 1, 2, or 3 markets where you're going to be like hyper focused, and that's plenty. Right. So start there. And yeah, again, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week on the training right here in the group.